Well, good morning, everybody. Good to see you. I'm not wearing a coat today because it's kind of soupy in here. If you can feel if your hair is sticking to you. If you happen to see two watery patches form here, just look right here, okay, during the sermon. My notes are all out of whack here. Oh my goodness, what did I do? I'm so sorry. Jeff, did you do this to me? All right. This shows you just how linked to my notes I am. Okay, here we go. Nope, not yet. Yeah. Oh, maybe these aren't maybe that's from last week. Here's the missing pages. All right, now this is all making sense. All right, good morning. Good to see you. Today we are continuing our series on anxiety together. This is the 7th week in a 9-week series, and over the past 6 weeks, we have looked into a passage in the book of Philippians in the New Testament. It's a letter that Paul wrote to a church in the city of Philippi. And he's talking to them about how they can incorporate their spirituality into the anxiety they feel in the world. And he gives us some very practical advice. The passage we've been looking at says this: "Do not be anxious about anything." How many of you have failed at that this morning already? I have. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That's what we want. The peace of God that is beyond what we can understand. That's what we're seeking. Then he goes on to write, finally, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Today we are looking at the word admirable. Whatever is admirable. Paul tells us that if we look at this word rightly and if we put it into practice in our lives, we'll start experiencing more peace. Maybe even a peace that transcends all understanding. The word admirable, of course, I'm sure you know this, but refers to people, places, or things that are worthy of recognition, worthy of praise. A person or a place or a thing that is admirable exhibits qualities that, when observed, command genuine respect. But here's where our current context in the world creates tension. What is commonly admired in our world today isn't always worthy of admiration. Consider the things that our culture celebrates, that our culture gives attention and time and energy to. Someone having a vast amount of wealth, regardless of how they got it. Celebrity, regardless of character. Power, regardless of how it is wielded. Or achievement, regardless of what it costs. These are the things that our world admires today. We have created societies where admiration has become all too easily detached from virtue. And I believe that this disconnect, and I think it's what Paul is writing about here, this disconnect is one of the major things feeding our collective anxiety in our world, in our city, in our communities, in our friendship circles. Last month, I had coffee with a young professional from our congregation, and I remember thinking when I was sitting across from, I can't even believe I'm calling him a young man. I remember being a young man. This young professional in our congregation. And he's working all these hours and struggling with just being on the verge of burnout all the time. Despite working 60-hour weeks and sacrificing family time and health and relationships and other opportunities, he somehow still felt that he wasn't measuring up in his life. And so I asked him, measuring up to what? Like, what standard are you weighing yourself against? And he said, to what success looks like. My life looks like no one around me. I don't feel successful. And when I pressed him to define that a little more, I started to understand what was going on better. His definition of success was not his own definition of success. Rather, it was a collage of images from social media or workplace expectations in his life, the things that the world around him expected of him. None of these things which aligned with his deepest values, but he was being tormented by them. And I think that this is what happens for so many of us when we admire something, even if it's not in the front of our minds, it's just kind of loaded on the hard drive of us somewhere. This is what happens when we admire without discernment. We chase these definitions of success that were never meant for human beings in the first place. And in this gap between what we are, what we really are, and what we think we should be, that is just the most perfect ground for anxiety to grow out of in our lives. Paul offers a different standard in this passage. He invites us to admire what truly represents something to be admired, not what merely appears impressive in our world. So, what is truly admirable? I'm so glad you asked, and I'm happy to answer that question. When I reflect on this question, I think about the people in my life who exhibit godlike qualities, if you will. They exude things with their life, with their behavior, with their words, with the way their presence feels when you're around them, that I want to embody, that I want to be more like. The strange thing is, though, is that every single one of these people in my life are almost invisible. Some of them don't have an Instagram account. How do you get through life without Instagram? What would we do from the hours of 12 to 3 a.m., right? These aren't people with some giant social media following. They don't have the most impressive resumes. Some of them didn't even go to university. None of them ever have the best seats at sporting events. More often than not, these are people who just exhibit these little qualities that I want more of in my life. They're people who are in control of their impulses. People who show up when it's difficult to show up. People who tell the truth even when it costs them. People who serve others but only in secret. And most importantly, people who grow from their failures rather than being defined by them. I want all of that. I want more of that times 100. I want all of those things to just be the first things that I exhibit in my life. And so, how do we do this? Does anybody in this room this morning want to be a worse person? Raise your hand if you want to be more terrible. Yeah, me neither. And it might seem lofty to be like the person that you most admire. But how many of you would like to be just a little more like the people you admire in your life? Yeah. So how do we do this? I have 3 easy steps for you. I'm kidding. It's not that simple. But I have 3 things I wanted to share with you this morning that help me to practice true admiration in my life. And I'm sure you could add some things to this list. But these are things that really work for me. Number 1, I need to become more conscious of what I am admiring. What voices shape my definition of success? I have to be careful who I listen to there. Whose approval am I seeking with my actions? What standards am I measuring myself against? These influences, if we're not aware of what we are ingesting with our minds, with our hearts, with our feelings, these are the architects of what we admire. Number 2, I try as best I can to actively celebrate what deserves celebration. You might not know what these 2 things mean, but on the Myers-Briggs type indicator, I'm an INTJ, and on the Enneagram, I'm a 5 wing 4. And what that basically means is that I hate parties. I am bad at parties. I show up at a party late and I leave a party early and I don't even say goodbye. I suppose there's some Irish in me. This more than any of these 3 things takes the most work for me, to actively celebrate what deserves celebration. When I witness something admirable, I choose not to stay silent about it. I was in the office on Thursday this week, and you might not know this, but behind all of the walls in this ancient building, where there could possibly be dead presidents buried or something, we have been putting in all of this piping throughout the entire building. And what we're putting in this piping, it's a updated sprinkler system for our daycare that is getting ready to expand. And I can't even feel this for myself. I can't convey to you the reality of how many extra hours and extra stressors and extra energy it has taken Desiree to manage that entire project. And I was trying to say how grateful I was to her on Thursday at the office. And because I'm not good at parties and not good at celebrating, I just said, Desiree, thank you so much for not quitting your job during this project. Like, that's what I wanted to celebrate, because every time she is in the office with a contractor and it gets tense, she just handles it perfectly. And I want to be able to do that. I can't sit down with a contractor without yelling at them. That's terrible. I should be able to, but I get so frustrated so quickly. And Desiree just stays on top of all of it. I'm grateful for that. And we're going to have a party for that in the coming weeks. And we're going to celebrate that. Why? Because it reduces anxiety. Because it brings us closer together around something that matters. So we must actively celebrate, whether we want to or not, what deserves celebration. Number 3, to embody what I admire. Notice Paul doesn't just say, think about these things, but he adds at the end, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice. In other words, the ultimate form of admiration is embodiment. You can't think yourself into a new way of living. Yes, it starts in your thoughts, but then you have to do it with this. That's how this stuff embeds in us and becomes a part of our lifestyles. To recognize it, to make a choice to celebrate it, and to do it, to embody it, even when we don't feel like we're good enough to do it. We do it anyway. And this week, as we go out into our world where we are literally being ripped apart news cycle by news cycle, when anxiety rises simply from watching a ticker tape on the bottom of the screen, I want to invite you to join me in practices like these. When anxiety threatens to overwhelm you, remember that your value is not determined by how well you measure up to our culture's standards. Your value is grounded in something deeper, something far more valuable. It is never cheap. In a world that is obsessed with appearance, be the substance. In a world that is fixated on achievement, focus on authenticity. And in a world that only often praises perfection, admire those who are able to say when they've been wrong and to change their ways. If more people on earth thought and lived like that, regardless of their opinions about God or faith or spirituality, this world could be so much better. May we have the wisdom to admire what truly deserves admiration and the courage to embody these qualities as we live our lives in a world of anxiety. Let's pray.